Greetings, heathens and heretics, and welcome once again to Tregenza Towers and in the Abyss in the Lounge, whatever you want to call it. Oh, no, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? But yeah. So this time we're doing something different. We're doing something we haven't done before.
Yeah, we're sitting in different seats.
Yes, exactly. To say we live on the edge is the biggest understatement ever.
No, this would be living on the edge. But
right. Enough of the puns. Right. So. So we always are, as music fans, you'll always argue about, you know, your favourite album by a certain band and whatnot. And there's loads of obvious ones out there, and there's loads of ones that are constant arguments. But we thought we'd choose a band that we don't actually talk about that often, but they're so important with the music we listen to, and that's Deep Purple. See, for me, Deep Purple's finest hour is Perfect Strangers. It's just perfect. It was essentially the comeback album of that classic Deep Purple lineup, and I believe that is when they were at their absolute best. But you think different?
I think different. I mean, I'm not going to come along and say this is my favourite Deep Purple album. I'm very much torn on that, but I think this is a standout album in their catalogue for specific reasons, which we'll talk about shortly. And that is Burn.
Right. So I'll give you my opinion on Burn. It's a great album. Mm-hmm. It's obviously the first album after the lineup change. Coverdale comes in on vocals, a very young, very hungry sounding David Coverdale.
Very hirsute David Coverdale.
Yes, very much so. And probably, to be fair, I think his best ever vocal performance.
I would not argue with you.
No, he sounds great.
He doesn't need the production that he
later relied on.
Benefit.
No.
He's always had the chops. But let's be honest, there was a lot of enhancement, over 10 years later, so not here.
No, right, yeah, that's fair enough. But it's a great album. I love it. You know, I'll always enjoy listening to it, and it is a very different Deep Purple to what's on Perfect Strangers. But what I love about Perfect Strangers is it was the return to that classic lineup. It's obviously got Gillan back, you've got Blackmore, all them coming back together, who obviously didn't like each other. I think that was fairly obvious. But that clearly created a chemistry. You know, there's so many bands over history that don't really get on, but, you know, the chemistry is there. Like bands like Faith No More, for instance, fucking hated each other, but created some incredible music. And that's where this album sits. It's the chemistry. It's Ian Gillan's favourite Deep Purple album.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, actually, considering the previous year, where he'd obviously joined up with Black Sabbath.
Yes, and the ill-fated Born Again.
Well, you see... Well, I mean, certainly ill-fated, but the thing is, Gillan actually enjoyed his time in Black Sabbath, even though he wasn't very good in it and it didn't really fit.
But that probably came down more to the album's production than anything else. The songs weren't bad.
Well, possibly. I mean, was Gillan maybe a little bit enhanced chemical-wise? Because the thing about Perfect Strangers is how I think, despite Deep Purple's reputation, he sounds relaxed. He sounds at home. And I think that really helps. Yeah. Whereas with Sabbath, I think he was trying a bit too hard on Born Again, wasn't it? And that definitely was the album's detriment.
Yeah, so maybe what happened with that helped him, go back to what he knew, what he was comfortable with in Deep Purple. And he's a great vocalist, Ian Gillan. Yeah. Love his voice. He's one of the greats. But this just hits right. I mean, Deep Purple as a whole, obviously, like I just said, massive influence on heavy metal. Huge influence, more than probably they get credit for, really. Because obviously that era, everyone talks about Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, later on Maiden. But at this point...
That's it. I mean, they are one of the trinity of unofficial heavy metal. So one of those, Black Sabbath was heavy metal. Yeah. So, let's be honest there.
But, people talk about Sabbath and they talk about Zeppelin, but I don't think Deep Purple get spoke about enough for their influence. You could say that every single one of their albums is different as well. They never really stuck to a particular formula. This, Burn is completely different to this. I know it's different lineups, but throughout their career, they've shifted a lot.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when they, entered the 70s and stopped playing outright blues rock, there was a bit of adventure on each album. I think didn't always work, and obviously they had that sort of extended sort of almost 8 years, 7-8 years break.
Yeah, it was about that. Yeah, between albums, it was. And then this comes along, and you've also got pardon the pun, John Lord's wonderful organ.
Well, yeah.
Which is like, it's like the centerpiece of this album for me.
It is, yeah, and I think it's at an 80s thing because you got, everywhere else you got synthesizers, and obviously in metal, it's not a thing. Metal bands are outright, we don't use synthesizers or keyboards. We're a metal band, and Deep Purple come and said, no, we've got John Lord.
Yeah,
let's make use of it.
Yeah, it did. So look, that's Perfect Strangers for me. So what is it about Burn? Why is that the better album?
I think certainly there's a bit more variety going on. I think Perfect Strangers, it's a good album. I mean, I think it's got the bounciest Deep Purple song in Hungry Days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a standout for me, as well as everything else. But it feels comfortable. Gillan was relaxed, and it's a nice background listen to, I think, in comparison to our Deep Purple albums. And I think we could talk about In Rock and Machine Head all day long. That's been done and dusted. For me, Burn, there's a lot of variety here. Lots of ebb and flow in just the sound, the riffs, and of course the vocal delivery. I mean, let's talk about the title track. The title track is one of Deep Purple's best songs.
That's how to open an album as well, isn't it?
Just it rattles on, and you know what? It even gets to a point where when the song thinks it's finished, they've all realised, oh shit, John Lord hasn't had a proper go, and get a few keyboard riffs in, and there we go, we're at it again. It's brilliant from start to finish. But this is I think the key thing here for me, and why I actually really like this album, is I'm a huge Soundgarden fan. I love Chris Cornell, God bless him, his vocals. And this was the album where I realised that actually the Coverdale influence was very strong. Because with Coverdale's later stuff, his White Snake stuff, it's very produced. It's not as earthy, it's not as raw. But you listen to this, you listen to stuff like Sail Away, and you can hear where I think Cornell got it from. And when he's going for it on the likes of Burn, it's and I love Cornell, but I think without Coverdale, he might have been a very different vocalist.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. You've mentioned it before, and I'd never clicked it, never clocked that at all. But then you listen to it, you can hear it. You can definitely hear where Cornell, it must have been an influence.
It's bizarre because Soundgarden started off in the mid-80s as an AC/DC tribute band. So you look at that and you think, oh, hang on a minute. It goes ebbs and flows. You've got a proper blues ballad there with Mistreated, which Coverdale can really latch onto. And you've got what I think of as basically a cop movie score in You Fool No One, where you've got all these sort of like 5 different percussionists going on and rattling through, and bit of keyboards and bit of guitar stuff going on, and it's not like a typical rock song. It's but it's very distinctive, and I think that's what plays to the strength of the album. Is there's always something to catch your ear, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, look, I mean, it is a great fucking album. A lot of people consider it Deep Purple's best, but for me, it's this. So, what do you think? That's more important. So, obviously these are just 2 albums in a very, very long back catalogue. This lineup didn't last much longer after this album. They tried again later on, still didn't work. So, it obviously wasn't meant to be, but I do believe that the chemistry those 5 guys had is pretty faultless. So that's me. Tell us if we're wrong, because he's wrong.
I don't care. Burn.
Well, tell us
that'll be my response. Burn.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Just before we go, don't forget this wonderful selection of beers.
And Tomoyo.
This week we will focus on the incredible 2112. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It'll blow your nuts off, but what an absolutely wonderful beer. So
I'm going to have to point out just an early warning, because we love Rush.
Oh, fuck it. I'm off. That's it. I'm off. watch the space when it comes to Rush. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So yeah, go and check these out. rcbw.shop, and you can order all online, deliver all over the country and whatnot. And if you're local to the Chelmsford area, you might even get personal delivery. So what more could you ask for? Right, that's it for this week. Don't forget, Perfect Strangers is clearly the best, and we'll see you again in a few days' time. Thanks for watching. Stay metal, or stay purple.